Welcome to Out with Dan, the podcast that spotlights and examines the voices of LGBTQ+ authors, characters, and our allies. Together, we lift our voices and we tell our stories. I'm Dan White. Join me as I chat with this week's author. Hello and welcome to Out with Dan. Today I'm so excited to be talking with Ripley Hayes about An Allotment of Time and the other books that she has written. Welcome, Ripley.
Thank you. I'm very pleased to be here.
Thank you. I know because I've read your work and I also read your bio on your autobiography that you live in the woods of Wales. And what prompted you to move to Wales or maybe out into the woods? Were you in Wales before?
No, I've lived in Wales for just under 20 years. As you can see, that's not from birth. But I moved here for a job to Wales. And then about 7 years ago, my employer, a university, gave me an offer I couldn't refuse, which was money to leave. So I said, well, if you put it like that, then obviously I need to leave. And I spent the money on this cabin that you can see around.
Lovely.
And it's actually, although it's on a holiday park, so there are other cabins here, it's a very heavily wooded area. And the cabins have sort of been dropped at random into the woods. And it's, many people say things about living amongst trees, and I would say, oh, well, that's just a bit of woo and, it's all kind of new age nonsense. But actually, it isn't. It's very peaceful living among the trees. And I can hear birds from 4 a.m. until just before, actually after I've gone to bed, that you can hear the owls setting out on their murderous quests. So it's actually a lovely, lovely, lovely place to live. And it's probably the place that I feel most at home.
Oh, that's a nice thing.
Everywhere I've ever lived, which is a lot of places, I just find it incredibly peaceful. And also, it's a very small cabin, about maybe 300 square feet, which, counts probably as a tiny house. And there's only me. I have lots of friends here, but I can, close the door and apart from my 2 dogs, speak to no one and just write. So I have this fabulous life.
That is wonderful. I will say that if you're going to be asked to leave somewhere like the university, it is always nice to be given money to go away.
Yes.
So I commend them on that part. So I loved this book, and and I'll tell everyone else that after reading An Allotment of Time, which is the 6th book in the Daniel Owen series, I went back and I started with the first book. The 6th one is will you explain what an allotment is first, and then we'll get into the mechanics of the book?
Okay, so an allotment is something that is very common in Britain, in England and Wales specifically. The local authorities in England and Wales are obliged by law to provide plots where people can grow food. And every town and village will have a field, usually within the boundaries of the settlement, which is divided into small plots, and people can rent them. And the rents are usually very, very low, maybe £20 a year.
Okay.
And you are obliged to grow food. You're not supposed to grow, and you're obliged to grow food for your own family. So you're not allowed to grow food commercially.
Got you.
So, and they're very much, they go in and out of fashion. So sometimes they're very trendy, and lots of young people are like, oh, I'm going to have an allotment and grow food. And sometimes they're just allowed to, they'll be a decade where they're not fashionable and they'll just all be overgrown, and there'll be a few kind of old guys with, you know, lovely vegetables grown in rows and full of disappointment that nobody else is using the plots.
That
And
was
they're
one of
very,
the
very part of British life, but they're not for everyone.
all right. Well, and I, having grown up out in the country, we had a garden, and I can tell you that while the food coming out of a garden is magnificent because it's fresh, it's here, it's now, it's a lot of work. Weeds grow
Oh,
quicker
yes.
than vegetables or fruit. So if you're going to have a nice garden, you have to work at it. I will say that my mom had one thing that she would say. The reason she had probably one of the prettiest gardens in town is because she said she knew when she planted a bean, she was getting a bean. She wasn't
Yes.
getting a tomato. And my mom was a bit of a control freak, but it worked out well because she could concentrate on it and it worked well for her. I, however, was a wee bit lazy, so maybe not so much for me.
I don't do any gardening at all. That's another thing about living here, is I don't have a garden because all the, you know, it's just woodland. There are brambles that I can eat in the autumn. There's nuts in the autumn that I can pick up. There's wild garlic out at the moment, but I
Nice.
am too lazy to garden.
You and I both. If you're going to write during the day, it's hard to garden during the day and write as well. So,
Exactly.
one of the things that I really loved about Daniel, the main character, is his love for his home, his
Oh yeah.
allotment, but his property. So that the property figures into the story, and it was something that happens with D.I. Carey is they go to the property, and I got the feeling from Daniel that he felt violated. And I can certainly understand why, because you've created a character that loves the land and loves his environment.
He's one of the things about Wales is the property here is much cheaper than it is elsewhere in mainland Britain.
Okay.
Not so much now, because obviously prices are going insane, but it's been a place that has attracted people who are a little bit alternative and who want to live off the land. Now, I have my opinions about, if you like, a return to subsistence farming, which is not for me at all. You know, I've already said I'm too lazy for that. But it is a thing, and it's the Welsh government has introduced a series of planning regulations that allow people to live off the land, and for planning restrictions to be relaxed. So there is very much a culture in parts of Wales, including the part where I live, to be a bit alternative. I mean, it's probably difficult for many US listeners to understand, because obviously in the US it's much more common for people to say, okay, I'm going to go and find a plot of land in Wisconsin or rural Texas, and I'm going to live there and nobody's going to tell me what to do. That doesn't happen here.
I laugh because unless you go far out into the woods, it doesn't happen here either. I think people have a romantic idea of what living and subsisting off the land would be. But I think the reality is, you know, to get a crop to grow, you have to buy the seedlings, you have to buy the fertilizer, the manure, the whole 9 yards. I mean, there's a lot to it, and you have to work it. It's like it doesn't, you may plant a potato, but you have to work at it to keep it growing.
Oh,
That
sure.
is, it's a
But
nice thing if that's your bag. I'd just rather go to the grocery store personally.
absolutely. Yes. Me too.
I sort of feel like we've earned the right to go to the grocery store. Now, if and I don't want to disparage anyone who farms, whether it's gardening or a real farm. I think that's wonderful. It takes a lot of hard work. But I love the convenience that we have in life. That's a pretty darned awesome thing to me.
And it's I mean, I have some opinions about drenching the land in chemicals and stealing all the water and so on and so forth. But
Yes.
farming is much more efficient than us growing, us each having an acre of land and growing our own potatoes and so on and so forth. And I want to drink coffee and eat chocolate, and I can't grow those things. And
You and I
I might
both.
make my own bread, but I don't grow my own wheat.
Right.
So.
Totally agree. Totally agree. So I do want to talk about Daniel and Mel. I love their relationship. You have done such a beautiful job with that. I like both the sexuality of their relationship, which is important to pat you on the back about, because a lot of authors don't want to have sex in their stories. Some may want to have a lot. I felt that it was just enough, and it was very loving, and it was very kind. They're very kind to each other, which is something I find as a reader to be very important to me. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Now tell me, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say I'm very flattered, because clearly I'm writing outside my own personal experience, although I do have a lot of gay male friends and I do ask them. Obviously I have, I'm a lesbian. I understand, what it is to be a queer person, but I've never been a man. I've never had sex with as a man with another man. So,
well, for someone who has, you did a good job.
I'm entirely comfortable with, and I do try to get it right.
You have done a good job at it. Congratulations. Do you have, so I know that you have other series as well. Do you have one that features a lesbian?
I do. I've written the first book, and it's the reason, taking a step back, the reason I started writing about men was because I like reading those, those stories. I like Gregory Ashe, I like C.S. Poe, I like Austin Thomas Burton's work, I like Marshall Thornton's work. I like lots of those books. But long before I started reading those books, I had a friend of mine who is a writer, and she was interviewed, and she said, I've written this particular book from a male perspective because I didn't want people to think it was autobiography. And so I had all these ideas about writing stories, and I thought, well, I don't want people to think I'm writing about myself. So I thought, well, that's okay. I'll just write about a queer man. And then it kind of took off and became very much part of that whole genre of gay mysteries. So as my confidence as a writer has grown, I've started thinking, well, okay, if I write about a woman or from a female perspective, nobody's going to think it's about me, because I'm nothing like any of the characters that I write about, because I'm old, I'm quite disabled, I don't, I've never been a detective. I've read lots of detective stories, but I've never been one. I was a university lecturer. I taught sociology. So, I'm nothing like these people. The only thing I have in common with them is I live in Wales. So I have written a female detective. And again, she's nothing like me, but I've really enjoyed writing it, and I will carry on. But at the same time, I want people to read my stuff. So I'm enjoying writing from a male perspective too.
I like that. And I think one of the things that we're fortunate with in today's world is fluidity. So one of the things that we see is not just in sexuality, but just in a person. We see a lot of fluidity being emphasized and discussed and talked about. My favorite color is probably pink. I wear a lot of pink, a lot of red, a lot of purple. It's, if you wear blue or black or brown or gray, it really doesn't matter. It's simply a color. But those colors for so long have been associated with a male or a female, or someone who's butch or femme or whatever that is. One of the wonderful things is we're beginning to see that no matter what sex we are assigned at or what we identify with, if we are a good author, we can write about anybody. It doesn't have to be pigeonholed. And that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, I agree with you. I do. It's often, as I'm sure you're aware, it's often debated, why are women writing men? Why are men writing women? Why are straight people writing gay characters? I think I've written characters of color, and I have consulted my friends. I have written Muslim characters. I have consulted my Muslim friends, and I've done a lot of reading. I've researched. But writing writing fiction is fiction. It's not real.
Yes. Yes.
If I was writing, if I was writing as I used to write when I was an academic, if every fact is checked, every reference is given, it's wonderfully freeing to write stories. I love writing stories.
Yes. And these are characters that you've created. You're not telling a history of some monarch in the past. You're creating a character and you're giving them a voice. And once again, I really enjoyed Mal and Daniel because they have a voice, but they're a team. And that is beautiful. And it doesn't matter whether you're two men, two women, man and a woman. It simply is these two are a great team together. They're different and similar. And that's a good thing, at least for the reader.
Yeah. Yes. And I think that as I've had lots of arguments with friends about, well, Daniel does this and Daniel does that, and he's slept with people who aren't Mal, and Mal's gone off and done other things. And I think, well, okay, maybe that's not exactly how the genre works, but it's how people work. And I think, they fall out, they split up, they sleep with someone else. That's how people
That's
are.
human. That's
not
human
just
nature.
Men, everybody.
Everyone. And while not everyone may go out and have sex with someone else, they go out and they form a bond of some sort with someone else. And then they may return to where they were before. It is a fact of life. And for anyone who doesn't like it, I suspect they're not being 100% honest, because it's like we are humans. We do things to protect ourselves and sometimes to do crazy things.
Yeah. I mean, my parents have been married for getting on for 70 years, and I suspect there have been no dalliances along the way, but other people are different.
Yes.
So you could write equally accurately that, these people met, they fell in love, and they never turned away. So I just wanted to write about people, ordinary people.
I totally love it. I really, really enjoyed your books. I've ordered No Friends. I have not started it yet. So that's in a different series of yours, right?
Yes.
All right.
I challenged myself to write something that wasn't Daniel and Mal, and I have learned a lot from writing it.
That's you can always return to Daniel and Mal anytime you want. So I'll be there to read it. So whatever.
I'm writing them now. I'm
good.
Book 7 now.
Oh, wonderful. And how many have you published so far? What is your, not just Daniel, but
6. There are 6 Daniel and Mals. There are 2 Lorne and Peter cozy mysteries that have got, they're quite different.
Okay.
And there is one Tima Crow book, which is about which has a female protagonist. And I'm thinking about not a replacement for Daniel and Mal, but another longer series with a gay detective. Because I just think, I guess there's a point at which much as you love those characters, there has to be conflict. For the book to be interesting, there has to be conflict. And I'm thinking, you know, Daniel and Mal are kind of getting married, and they haven't finished with their problems yet, as you will discover in book 7, if you read it, or if anybody reads it. They haven't finished with their problems, but they are kind of reaching an accommodation. They're starting to find, you know, Daniel is no longer a policeman, although obviously he's still solving murders, and I guess they're getting older. Things are settling for them, and I don't want to keep creating problems that maybe in 10 years' time they'll have a different set of problems. But now they're kind of overcoming the problems that have led them to this point, I hope.
I think so. I'm looking forward to number 7 already.
Good.
So write faster.
Okay.
Oh, Ripley, thank you so much for joining me. I have had such a wonderful time. Do you have social media or a website that you would like to share?
My website is utterly awful, so I'm not going to share it, but I do post on Facebook most days, and you can find me at Ripley Hayes Author.
Perfect.
But I'm getting a website. I am. I'm going to. I've decided I can spend my time writing, or I can learn how to set up a website. So I'm going to pay someone to set up a website.
It can take a lot of work, because trust me, mine's a little behind as well. So there will definitely be no judgment from me on that aspect. So, Ripley, once again, thank you so much for joining me. And if you'll hang on, I'll be right back with you.
Thank you. I've loved it.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us with Out with Dan. See you soon. Thank you for joining me for this week's episode of Out with Dan. You can find more information about this podcast and its host at OutWithDan.com, on Twitter at OutWithDan, and on Instagram and Facebook at GoOutWithDan. This podcast is hosted by Authors on the Air Global Radio Network, and the theme music is provided by bensound.com. Join us again soon for the next episode of Out with Dan.